Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So here is one thing that I have been asked dozens of times in the past week or so, and I did promise that I will cover this topic. So it is upcoming week 3 track meta and, well, basically week 1 meta as well, but primarily we're going to be focusing on specifically the week 3 track meta for Battlegrounds, because it is quite a difficult one, quite a limiting one, and there are quite few things to keep in mind. So first of all, let's read the notes, and this is going to be the first of 2 videos that I released today. This video is going to be more or less talking about the meta and the things to look out for, and obviously things that I believe are going to be utilized. This video purpose is to help you guys understand the meta better and which champions will likely have more value in it. And then we are going to be making a separate video where I'm going to be pointing out the MVP champions more directly. I'm just going to go over the champions that we are more than likely going to see do best offensively and defensively. So in this first video, a bit more generic one, we want to go over the nodes. So we have electric defense, which is each time defender is struck while under effect of an armor or buff, they will power burn the attacker for 10% of a bar of power. Power burn damage scales with each armor up, as well as defender's base attack. When struck, the defender gains a cheat-in charge. At 10, all charges are removed, and the defender gains an armor buff, increasing armor by 50%, lasting 30 seconds. And the first thing that we can understand here from the 30-second duration in a 2-minute fight, it is that it's going to be virtually impossible to wait it out. Like, if they had a shorter duration, 10-second duration, something like that, there would be more options, because you could hit the opponent 10 times, they get the armor buff, and you wait it out for 5-10 seconds, and then you attack more or less as normal. You just kind of need to pay attention to it. Now, with the 30-second duration, it is not really going to be possible. So we will be forced to deal with this power burn with these nodes in general. So the most important things, obviously, around this entire node combination are armor buffs and power burns. And that is going to exactly tie in to our offensive options, how we can deal with these nodes and which champions we can use. There are 4 ways how to deal with this node combination, and the first one of them involves flat-out power burn immunity. There are more power burn immune champions. I'm going to point out all of them, or most of them, as far as I know anyways, in, second video. But here, the important thing is that we recognize that there are champions who are power burn immune. Therefore, there will be a very small subset of champions that can just flat out ignore the nodes. Obviously, you still have to deal with all the defender's abilities, but in this case, for instance, Red Goblin, you can use him offensively. It doesn't matter, opponent has 1, 10, or 50 armor buffs. He is not going to take any damage, he's not going to get power burned, and you can use him as normal. And that is, the ideal, the best way how to deal with this entire situation, when you just don't care about it. It doesn't do anything to you, you're immune to it. It's kind of like when, you get a bleed at start of each match, and if your champion is bleed immune, there is no node, basically. This is pretty much the same thing, and by far the most efficient one. I will point out all of the power burn immune champions from best of my knowledge anyways, but Red Goblin is one of them. The second way how to deal with node is very obvious: armor break. There is going to be quite important differential in between champions that have access to armor break and champions that have easy access to armor break. Because if you can armor break with like your level 2, you might struggle line everything up, and it is not going to be too easy to use those champions. But any champion with easily, reliably accessible armor break will be able to deal with these nodes, provided that your opposing champion is not armor break immune. And that is where you guys are gonna start seeing this kind of rock, paper, scissors mechanic, because there is obviously very limited amount of champions that are fully power burn immune, and everything else you will have to rely on 3 different abilities, basically. One of them being armor break. Next 2 we're going to talk, and it's going to be a rock, paper, scissors effect, because obviously if opponent throws down a Dr. Doom, Dr. Doom is armor break immune, and then Thor will not work. But as long as Thor can armor break the opponent, and as long as he can, defeat whatever opposing champion is there, For instance, he will work extremely well because he will armor break on every stun, which includes parry stun. Therefore, you will have quite an easy time getting rid of opponents' armor ups as and when they appear. Even if opponent starts with an armor up, this strategy is kind of like quite safe as well. So, you know, we're going to have OG Thor, we're going to have quite a few other champions that have access to that armor break quite easily and reliably. Then moving on, Nullify. And with Nullify, I include the rest of the Stagger, Fate Seal, Neutralize, and stuff like that. Obviously, here again, we are playing that rock, paper, scissors mechanic because there are champions that are Nullify immune, which nullification tactic is obviously not going to work. Not to mention that the different mystics have different ways of nullifying or staggering. So, one of the best and most potent nullifies in the game period is the Scarlet Witch one, where on a parry you can just get rid of a buff and feed your Mystic Dispersion. And Mystic champions as a group, as a subset, I think are going to be quite powerful here, because every 10 hits you get an opportunity to nullify opponent's buff. Or if opponent doesn't start with an armor up, then it's especially perfect, because then all of the stagger champions will work, and those are extend past the Mystic boundaries, because we do have stagger on Titania, we do have stagger on Anti-Venom, for example. And then we have some of the more new age Mystic champions who do not have direct nullify in their kit, but they do have stagger abilities. So that is going to be another subset of how to deal with the new node. Opponents have an armor buff, you nullify it, the armor goes away, you're safe, you feed your Mystic Dispersion. So overall, I do expect there to be quite a few Mystic champions, because a lot of Mystics are also extremely potent defenders that do require fairly specific counters. And given this new requirement here for a champion to either be able to nullify or armor break, or, and I'm gonna move to the next one in a second, I do think a lot of Mystics are going to be extremely tricky and devastating in the new meta. And then we have the final and fourth way how to deal with these nodes, and that is pretty much as always ability accuracy reduction. Now, it doesn't have to be flat out 100% like we have with Falcon. It can be a mixture of, you know, some other ability accuracy reduction mechanics like Archangel, for instance, or Disorients and things like that. The important thing here is that whilst it will not work in every match, but ability accuracy technically works against both of the nodes. So, for instance, in case of Falcon, I need to get back to this. So, in case of Falcon, for instance, even if opponent already starts with an armor buff, Falcon's ability accuracy reduction will reduce the electric defense, and even if opponent has an armor up, whilst you are hitting them with a lock on, you will not be taking any damage back. You will not get power burned, because ability accuracy is going to prevent this. And then furthermore, there's also this hit me I dare you node. So the champions that do not start without an armor buff, whilst you're hitting opponent who is disoriented, for instance, you will need significantly more than 10 hits in order for them to get that armor buff. Obviously, eventually they still will, and then you will still have to deal with the consequences there. But the point is that both of these nodes are subject to ability accuracy reduction, and you can bypass it with things like Falcon and Archangel and stuff like that. Again, some champions like Archangel will struggle here more so if opponent starts with an armor up, so you would have to technically deal with some power burn initially. But overall, I do think there will be some of the most potent options here, like Falcon, like Archangel, well, pretty much as always, whenever they do work. And then we can look at what we have to deal with defensively. The defensive aspect, defensive focus, I think, number one is going to be on champions that start with an armor buff, because a lot of these champions that need to get to, I don't know, a level 1 or do something in order to be able to nullify will struggle more, because, again, ability accuracy reduction is not always available immediately. Nullification abilities are not always available immediately, and same with armor break abilities, you know. Some people might end up using champions who need the level 1, for instance, armor break, and if you start with an armor buff already, they will just likely never get to that level 1. So, first group of champions that likely will have presence in the next meta are just simply champions that already start with an armor buff, because that eliminates that 10 hit buffer that opponent might have. But again, Nullification and armor break champions to a degree still might work, but it is something to keep in mind here. Second group of champions is definitely going to be the champions that are armor break immune. So we're going to have Man-Thing, we're going to have Dr. Doom, we're going to have Sasquatch, and several others. Because if you can't armor break them, then you can't get rid of armor ups with armor break champions. And that, again, is going to be tricky. That's going to take away, that's going to narrow the amount of champions that will be able to counter these fights effectively. Obviously, you know, in case of Sasquatch, for instance, you will not need to worry about armor break champions, but you still need to worry about nullify champions. You still need to worry about ability accuracy reduction champions. So, it is, again, as I said before, it's going to be kind of like a rock, paper, scissors, where if you have this immunity, then opponent's job is going to be to find a champion that works well and fast against Sasquatch and does not rely on the thing that Sasquatch is immune. So it's going to be a very draft-dependent meta, without a doubt. And moving past armor break immunity, we obviously still have nullify immunity. Obviously, Galen is going to be flat-out perfect and perma-banned, but it's just an example of a champion that does have nullify immunity. We could put on an Omega Sentinel here, or a handful of other champions. Like Thing, for instance, where, again, Thing is armor break and nullify immune. Therefore, only way how to deal with Thing in the next meta, realistically, is going to be ability accuracy reduction, which is going to make Thing a very, very desirable defender, because, again, he eliminates majority of the ways how to deal with that champion. And then, yeah, if opponent doesn't have, like, a Falcon or some other very specific counter, Thing is going to be a big problem, more than likely. Because, again, being immune to 2 out of the 3 things, super important. Same with Galen, defensively. Galen, well, Galen's immune to nullify, but you can still armor break him and stuff like that. But obviously, we're all focusing on Galen being immune to power burn offensively. But either way, so being immune to nullify will obviously prevent, you know, most of the Mystic champions to do anything to these champions, with the caveat here that neutralized champions obviously still bypass nullify immunity in most cases. And then the final thing is champions with increased ability accuracy or immune to ability accuracy reduction. Ironically, for instance, there will be times that an Archangel is going to be like a solid option. If opponent needs to use champion that relies on disorients or something in order to bypass the node, then, you know, Archangel's ability accuracy can be reduced. So I fully expect there to be some matches where in offset Archangel ends up getting a defensive W next meta. Same as Longshot, for instance. Because Longshot, as a champion, obviously he's going to work as an offensive champion, because not only he has instant nullification potential with his signature ability, he also is obviously fate sealing the opponents and preventing them from gaining these armor ups. He has very quick and easy way how to get to his level 2. Likely before opponent will get that armor up. And then to top it all off, obviously you can also throw Longshot on defense. And for instance, if opponent tries to use something like Falcon against Longshot, then his increased rate of ability accuracy is still going to mean that the nodes work, the cheating charges are gained, he gains his armor ups, and he power burns when he does get those armor ups. So, you know, Longshot's another example of quite a sneaky champion. So those are going to be kind of like the basics of the next meta. Now, the thing that is quite worrisome in the next meta is that there are all of these specialty things to take care of, and then obviously there are all of the de facto, you know, strong and powerful defenders. And the mixture of this node plus innate champions, you know, for instance, going over still against the Sasquatch, if you're using him as an example, you know, Sasquatch typically does require more or less a fairly specific opponent to do well against him, or even more so, let's say, Rintro or something. And it isn't necessarily easy to take those champions down in 2 minutes as is. And then when you add all of these extra conditions on top of it, so in case of Sasquatch especially, you know, typically you would want to use a science champion against Sasquatch, because there aren't that many champions from other classes that will do great against Sasquatch. And then having to find a champion that deals with these armor ups might prove to be extremely difficult. So I do expect there to be a handful of quote-unquote curveballs for champions. You know, it might be Korg, it might be Sasquatch, it might be Man-Thing, it might be something else, where there are just very little viable counters to these champions, because, you know, typically you would use, I don't know, Spider-Ham. Great, you can't really use Spider-Ham because, you know, he's going to get power burned all the time. What, Mr. Fantastic, again, you're going to struggle using Mr. Fantastic. Maybe you can get away with using Mr. Fantastic with getting to level 2 and then level 1 in time in order to stagger, because Mr. Fantastic does have stagger on his level 1, but it's going to be very hard to use that in theory anyways. And who else do we often use against Sasquatch, you know? I don't know, Joe Fixit, you know, Joe Fixit can't get rid of armor buffs, he doesn't have stagger. And there's going to be fairly limited amount of champions that, you know, can do Sasquatch well enough. Or like Scorpion, for instance, you know? Again, Scorpion's likely going to struggle in the next meta because he has nothing, no way to deal with armor ups, and he's not power burn immune. So, you know, it's going to be another one of these staple champions going away for the entire meta. And then I do expect to see some defenders that do not necessarily have, you know, all of these armor break immunities or stuff like that, just generic hard defenders. Like Rintrah could be potentially quite hard defender, because Rintrah doesn't have many great options as is, and then being forced out to cross out anyone that doesn't have a way to deal with that armor up buff that he will get, you know, it can be quite tricky, it can be quite rough. So it's going to be very interesting meta. Let's see how it works out. But this is more or less what you need to be aware of, and this is what most people will end up focusing on. So to quickly recap, obviously we need to be aware of champions that are fully power burn immune. Those are going to be the best ones. Then we have armor break as a way to get rid of armor up. Then we have nullify and neutralize and fate seal and all the standard mystic abilities. And then we have ability accuracy reduction. Those are going to be like the 4 cornerstones of offensive strategies in the upcoming meta. And then defensively, we obviously are going to have to pay attention to champions that already start with armor ups, even though I do not think that is going to be necessarily as important, but it could be. Then we have champions that are immune to armor break, because again, it will eliminate a fairly decent subset of potential counters to them. Then we're going to have champions that are immune to nullify, because again, that can make most of the mystic champions kind of irrelevant. And then we have champions with increased ability accuracy. So those are the 4 abilities and 4 kind of immunities to look out for in the next meta. The following video that I'm going to make is I'm going to try my best to kind of list the most viable champions that have these specific aspects. I might split it up offensively and defensively, or I just might make it all together. We'll see how long it works out. But I hope you guys find this video useful, because it is in essence what you guys wanted from me, and that's why I decided to flesh out this subject a bit more. So yeah, I hope you guys liked it. Hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the good buttons, and I will catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the